It's been such an enriching morning to just spend time and listen to colleagues. And I'm going to talk a little bit about JWT and then why I'm talking about culture. But I almost think that my presentation can be almost a wrapper because everything everyone's talked about today fits into culture. But let me talk about J. Walter Thompson. And we are now going to be J. Walter Thompson. We are 10,000 people worldwide. We have 200 offices in 64 countries. We were started, and this is our 150th anniversary year. So although we're not officially the first advertising, we are clearly the oldest advertising agency. And with that comes a lot of responsibility, in my opinion. But our company was founded by a chap named J. Walter Thompson. And he, over the years, was seen as a pioneer. He really did lead the industry. And for years as a company, we and advertising attracted people easily. We've all seen Mad Men. It was a fun, and it is a fun industry. But now the industry is changing in that young talent have many, many options. And we are really being challenged by the Yahoos, the Googles, the Unilevers, companies who are really beginning to go after young talent, attract young talent with culture, and with also a view about what purpose is. So when we were sitting here at our 150th anniversary year, we had to start thinking about what do we want to be and how do we want to be relevant for the next 150 years. We're also in an extraordinary time this year because we are in a CEO leadership transition. Our current global CEO, Bob Jeffrey, is retiring after 16 years. We've hired in a global president, and this year they are jointly leading the company, which in advertising is pretty extraordinary, and I think in corporate America is pretty extraordinary to have two people collectively joined at the hip leading the organization. But it's to ensure that we are retaining what is JWT, J. Walter Thompson, our culture, and it's helping our new CEO really be able to step in and lead for the next 10, 15, whatever years, but to ensure that we are continuing to attract great talent. And as important that we're retaining great talent. So that's why we started talking about culture, because as we're going through this leadership change, it's a particularly good time to say, what is our culture? What should our culture be? How do we compete in this world where, if I look at North America, 60% of our talent is under 30. So we have a lot that we have to think about from a cultural perspective. And I have to also convince leadership a little bit of why it's so important to spend time doing that. And what we know is that strong cultures definitively drive profit, innovation, and brand distinctiveness. We heard it a bit today when you go in and search. Are you searching for a marketing job or an advertising job? Or you're searching for a job at J. Walter Thompson. That's what we want to be able to do. I'm thrilled that we have some of my colleagues here from the audience. Within J. Walter Thompson, we have an entity called JWT Inside. And what they do is focus on employee and employee engagement and communications. And they've done some research, and they've been pulling data from all sorts of sources, both proprietary research but secondary research. And they've done a very significant study on culture, but I wanted to pull out some things for this meeting. If you look at this and you look at 100 best places to work, it is clear those companies that are ranked high as best places to work have better returns, double the returns of other companies. In addition, if you look at their turnover on average is half of what their non-listed companies are, i.e. those companies that are not considered top places to work have turnover issues. So this is a real proof that culture can and does impact profitability of a company, and that's a pretty compelling argument to talk to a CEO about. We also then had Sonar, which is an internal research company, do some proprietary research, and they went out and surveyed, mostly in North America, of what people thought about great cultures. And basically they are inspiring, and they are truly, truly irresistible to work for. And there's a lot of data on this chart, but just look at the percentages. It doesn't almost matter. 80, 90%. Millennials want to work for a company with a strong culture. They want to work for a company that they feel like can be part of contributing to the culture. They will leave, 80% will leave a company specifically because of culture. So at the end of the day, culture is not just something nice to do. It is fundamental to being profitable, innovative, and building your brand. And IBM said it best a few years ago. Lou Gerstner said, culture isn't one aspect, it is the game. And so who is responsible for culture? At the end of the day, it really is a C-suite objective that the CEOs, the chief talent officers, everyone sitting at the C-suite has to be committed to it. And they really have to engage their leadership teams so that it's cascaded down the organization. So you have a culture that's consistent through the organization. And it's shaped every day, because albeit that your leadership will be setting the direction, the pace, people come into work every day and create the culture. They create the experience. And so how do you think about how do you influence that culture? How do you define it? How do you continue to define it? How you influence it? And I show this picture to my leadership because, again, the advertising industry is changing, communication's changing. And I don't know if anyone has ever been river rafting, but you usually have a raft guide, right? The raft guide sits at the back. He or she has to have clear line of sight of going down the river, particularly when you start to hit rapids, because you've got to know where the boulders are, where the currents are. How are you going to leverage the team on that boat to ensure that you carry on? You don't lose line of sight of what the direction of the company is, the vision. And we all know that there are more boulders and there are more currents and there are more challenges today than ever before. So leaders really have to be clear about the direction they're going in. They have to have everyone on the boat, on board, doing their particular role and not losing sight of the fact that they need to pull really hard too. And at any given moment in time, different parts of the organization have to contribute. But you mustn't lose line of sight. And this has helped me talk to the leadership about culture and why they have such a critical role. It's not something to be delegated. It's not something that just happens. They, as leaders, have to continue to know and shape the culture of the organization. This is the slide that Ian, from my colleague from JWT Inside, loves, which is strong cultures are designed and managed. They don't just happen. And the analogy here is to a garden, right? When you go into a garden, it's a beautiful place. It radiates a certain amount of peace and beauty. And it's tended, it's cared for, it's loved. And so when you think about culture, again, it's not something that's just going to happen overnight without intent, vision, and leadership support to do that. And perhaps the company that said it best was the head of Whole Foods. And I think this is a beautiful statement. You never can take culture for granted. It's intangible, but it's living and alive. And companies have to continue to invest in their culture, just like they would invest in any other asset. You have to refresh it, you have to engage in it, and you have to continue to treasure it. I think the notion of treasuring is really important too. I think that resonates with people about a culture and organization where they have leadership feeling it's more than the numbers. Because most millennials, if you go back to that first slide, are not looking for just a company that's successful from a financial point of view, but one that they are engaged with and they feel emotionally connected to, and that's what culture is about. And if left unchecked, cultures can and will fall into disarray. This feels bad. It's almost like a drain. Emotionally, you're drained by something that is not beautiful. And this is about going to the way your offices look too, right? That's another part of culture, which is why I said everything everyone's talked about feeds into culture. Taking care of your garden, taking care of your culture is fundamental, because this is not where people will want to be and will opt out of pretty quickly. But let's be careful, right? Because culture is not a series of controlled events. It's not friendly. It's not, let's have birthday cake on birthdays. That's not what it's about, right? People don't want disingenuous or surface feelings of culture. It's about being around a common purpose and feeling a sense of accomplishment and commitment to an organization. They're fun. I'm not saying they're not fun, but that's not defining culture. So your organization says, yes, we have a culture. We have a pool table. We have a ping pong table. We celebrate birthdays. That's not culture. That's fun. And that's fine, but that's not culture. Culture's overarching, right? It's a process. And Harvard Business Review has done a tremendous amount of research on this. And if you're in a process, you're beginning to think about your culture and how you need to really take care of it and treasure it. Harvard Business Review is a great source, as many Booz Allen, Gallup, all of them, but they talk about this collaborative process of creating a shared awareness of understanding of everyone's perspective in the organization, right? So it's collective, it's shared, and you have to make sure that people are aligned with it. And it's part of how you onboard people, it's how you reward people, it's how you recognize people around this common sense of purpose. And again, Harvard Business has done a great job of identifying just some basics about how to think about your culture. And they talk about these 6 pillars. And I'm not going to go into them, I'll send you the decks, but it's really important that it shows all the different pieces that make up what is culture. You've got your vision. Okay, go back to the leadership line of sight. What does the company vision look like? Does everybody understand it? Is it clearly communicated? Do the values support that? Again, are they really clearly understood and communicated? How do we practice it? Every day, what does that look like in the organization? And people, okay? People have to believe it because every organization, whether you're advertising where 55% of our costs are people, or you're manufacturing, it's still all about that talent in the building who define every day what your culture is. There's a narrative. How are you going to tell the story? And we're going to hear about storytelling in a moment. But what's the story you tell about the company? More recently at JWT, J. Walter Thompson was a Commodore of a yacht club. And we talk about the Commodore. We talk about the Commodore and his pioneering ideas. And it begins to create a narrative around the company that everyone at J. Walter Thompson understands and feels part of, and makes us quite different than any other communications or advertising company, because they don't have the Commodore. And lastly, place. Okay, and we talked a lot about this today. Where you are and how you interact with your teams reflects again back, what do we value? Do we value teamwork? Well, if we do, we have to have a place that creates that. So all those things, that wrapper, is when we talk about with culture. And probably the company that we all can identify with as being really strong in terms of culture is Google. And when you look at them as an organization, you can line up all the different things they do against those pillars. And I looked at Google for a lot of reasons. Inspiration and a direct competitor. They're really starting to come after people in the advertising industry because they're looking for innovation and creativity. But Google hasn't left those pillars to chance, and they haven't left any of their cultural aspects to happenstance. They actually engage social scientists early on, and they study the organization. They run experiments all the time. Everything from what's the optimal wait time in the cafeteria that gives people a chance to interact versus, we don't want them to be on line too long. Everything is optimized, so they really study it, and they've created an entire operation within Google called People Operations. And they look at how they can promote and support and optimize workplace performance, all geared to giving people a great experience, but to supporting the culture that is so important to Google. And sometimes it's hard for people to define, but they feel it. They drink the Kool-Aid. And when you talk to people, and Ian had said this to me, when you ask a person who's really proud of an organization, they tell you, I work for Google, I work for Yahoo, I work for Unilever, I work for J. Walter Thompson. If they're not proud of their culture, they'll say, I work in HR, I work in advertising. And that's what you want to do, is make people really proud of your brand because they feel proud of the culture. And it goes back to, engagement. And culture is part of how you create an organization of people that want to be engaged. And this is I think this is helpful, right? Because it looks at the cultural evolution. I know that I am, as J. Walter Thompson, we're not quite at the Google level yet, but I know where my aiming point is. And I think it's really helpful to understand where you are in terms of whether you've come from a very traditional-oriented culture, or you've got a culture that's beginning to put in perks, or you've got a culture that's beginning to have real purpose, and then getting to a best places to work. And I think every one of us has the opportunity to say, how do I get my organization to best places to work, and by when? And what are the stepping stones to get there? And that's a very compelling argument to leadership. Do you want to be in best places to work? Go back to the first slide. It shows that if you have an organization that is the best places to work, better returns, lower turnover, a more successful company. It's a compelling argument. And so they really have to understand at every level they need to be committed to whatever the culture of the organization is. And it has to be lived out every day. It's how you hire people, it's how you fire people, it's promotion. All those decisions are clear examples of how you're living your culture. You have to be also open to organic developments. And again, going down the river, hitting rapids, sometimes you have to adjust and be willing to adjust and able to adjust with your team. You have to empower informal leaders. There are other leaders in the organization who are really important to developing culture. You have to empower them. And in our organization, particularly at JWT, because we're in so many countries, we need to be able to allow for diversity. Geographic diversity, all sorts of diversity, but that doesn't take away from the culture, the wrapper of what J. Walter Thompson is. So in summary, I'm finishing up a little bit early. At the end of the day, there's nothing more exciting, thrilling, when you've gone down a rapid, right, with a team, with a leader, and feeling that you're all in the boat together and you've achieved something quite extraordinary. And that's what a strong culture can do. That's what strong leadership must encourage every day in the organization. And it's why we, going back to what was just said, we as HR and talent professionals have extraordinary roles to play. We have some of the best jobs in our organizations, and we must never lose sight of that either. Culture is what we have been tasked to protect, and it's our job to treasure it. So I hope you have beautiful gardens. Enjoy the rapids. And if you ever need, I've listed our names here and you'll see them, but Ian and the people from JWT Insight have done brilliant research on this and how to implement it in organizations. Thank you.